One of the most devastating truths for a narcissist to face is that they are not in control. Their entire psychological framework revolves around maintaining dominance over others, manipulating perceptions, dictating emotional climates, and orchestrating how people respond to them. This need for control is not merely a preference, it is a survival mechanism. The narcissist's fragile self-image cannot tolerate the idea that anyone else could hold power over them, or worse, that they could be rendered irrelevant. And yet this is precisely why walking away is such a profound act of defiance. It is the one move that dismantles their ability to control you, leaving them powerless in the face of your autonomy. To understand why this is so destructive, you need to grasp the psychological dynamics at play. Narcissists rely on a carefully constructed reality where they occupy the central position. They create an environment where you begin to question your own perceptions and emotions, subtly shifting your sense of self so that you become dependent on their approval. It's a slow, insidious process, one that often begins with charm and validation, but over time that validation becomes conditional and their approval becomes a scarce commodity. You find yourself working harder to stay in their good graces, even at the expense of your own identity. This manipulation is not random, it is deliberate. The narcissist's power lies in making you believe that your worth hinges on their attention. And once you accept that premise, once you begin to measure your value through their gaze, they have you. They no longer need to be overtly cruel or controlling. The power dynamic is already established. You are caught in a loop where their reactions dictate your emotional state, and that dependency keeps you tethered to them. Now, here is the critical point. When you walk away, you destroy that dynamic. You refuse to participate in the psychological game they have engineered. You stop seeking their approval. You reject the idea that they define your worth. And for the narcissist, this is intolerable. Their sense of superiority hinges on the belief that they are in control, not only of themselves, but of everyone around them. When you remove yourself from their grasp, you are doing more than leaving a relationship or cutting off communication. You are fundamentally challenging their worldview. Consider this. Narcissists do not perceive relationships the way healthy individuals do. For most people, relationships are built on mutual trust, respect, and genuine connection. But for the narcissist, relationships are transactional. They extract emotional and psychological resources from those around them while offering little in return. Every interaction is a negotiation for power. And when you walk away, you terminate the transaction. You are no longer a source of validation or a pawn in their game. The impact of this cannot be overstated. Narcissists need control because at their core they are deeply insecure. Beneath the grandiosity lies a profound fear of being powerless, unworthy, and insignificant. Your willingness to walk away forces them to confront that fear head on, and because they cannot tolerate the reality of their own vulnerability, they will often react with rage, desperation, or attempts to pull you back into their orbit. But if you remain firm, if you refuse to engage, you strip them of the very thing they rely on. Your participation in their reality, there is a philosophical dimension to this as well. Walking away is an assertion of free will. It is a declaration that you are not defined by the narratives others impose upon you. And that kind of autonomy is profoundly threatening to anyone who seeks to control you. When you choose to leave a narcissist's influence, you are not merely rejecting their behavior, you are affirming your right to determine your own path. You are saying, I am not an extension of your ego, I am a sovereign individual. And that, more than anything else, is what breaks their power. And here is something even more profound. When you walk away, you are not only freeing yourself from the narcissist's grip, you are reclaiming your ability to think clearly, to feel authentically, and to live on your own terms. Narcissistic control thrives in an atmosphere of confusion and self-doubt. But the moment you remove yourself from that environment, clarity returns. You begin to remember who you are outside of their influence. And that clarity is what allows you to heal. In the end, walking away is not just an act of defiance, it is an act of liberation. It is the recognition that you are not beholden to anyone who seeks to diminish you. And it is a reminder that true power lies in the ability to choose your own reality. When you walk away, you are doing more than breaking free from a toxic relationship. You are reclaiming your right to be the author of your own life. And if there is one truth a narcissist cannot bear, it is this: they are not and never were in control of you. The most unsettling reality for a narcissist is that their power is entirely dependent on your participation. They do not possess an inherent ability to control others. What they have is a finely tuned capacity to manipulate, distort, and coerce. But none of that works without your engagement. The moment you walk away, you sever the very mechanism that sustains their influence. You disrupt the cycle of manipulation by doing the one thing they cannot tolerate: removing yourself from their reach. At the heart of narcissistic control lies a fragile, even pathological need for validation. Despite their outward appearance of confidence or superiority, they are fundamentally insecure. This insecurity is not superficial. It is rooted in a profound internal void. Without a constant supply of admiration, attention, and emotional reactions from others, the narcissist is left to confront their emptiness. They cannot regulate their own self-worth from within, so they rely on extracting it from those around them. In psychological terms, this is called narcissistic supply. And without it, their carefully constructed facade begins to crumble. What makes this dynamic particularly insidious is how the narcissist creates the illusion that you need them, when in fact it is the other way around. They invest significant energy in convincing you that your emotional stability, your self-esteem, and even your identity are tied to their approval. It's not an accident, it's by design. By fostering dependence, they keep you tethered to their world. And the more you internalize the belief that you require their validation, the easier it becomes for them to maintain control. But here's the truth they desperately want to keep hidden. Their power exists only as long as you remain within the system they've built. You do not need them. It is they who need you. And when you walk away, you expose that reality in the most devastating way possible. Consider what happens when you no longer react to their provocations. Narcissists thrive on eliciting emotional responses, whether through praise, fear, anger, or guilt. Every reaction you give feeds their sense of significance. If you argue, defend yourself, or try to make them see reason, you are playing into their hands. Even negative attention confirms their importance in your life. But when you walk away, when you refuse to engage, you deliver a profound blow to their delusion of control. You signal that their influence no longer dictates your reality. This refusal to engage is not passivity, it is an assertion of power. Walking away is not about weakness. It is an act of profound strength. It requires the courage to let go of the illusion that you can change them, that you can extract accountability from someone who has no interest in self-reflection. And crucially, it requires you to confront the part of yourself that may still crave their validation. That is no small task. But once you commit to that path, the narcissist loses their primary tool of control, your attention. Now, why does this unsettle them so deeply? Because without your participation, the narcissist is forced to confront the reality of their insignificance. When you walk away, you no longer mirror back the grandiose image they wish to project. You no longer play the role they have assigned you. And in that absence, they are left with themselves, an identity they have spent a lifetime avoiding. This is why many narcissists respond with rage or desperate attempts to pull you back in when you try to leave. It is not love, nor is it regret. It is panic, the panic of losing their primary source of self-worth. But here's the paradox. The more you withdraw, the weaker their grip becomes. Narcissistic control cannot survive without your willingness to participate. And once you recognize this, you begin to see their power for what it truly is. A fragile illusion. You realize that the entire structure of their manipulation is predicated on the assumption that you will keep showing up, keep explaining yourself, and keep seeking their approval. The moment you decide otherwise, the structure collapses. Philosophically, this raises a profound question about the nature of freedom. True freedom is not merely the absence of external constraint. It is the ability to define yourself independently of others' perceptions. Narcissists seek to trap you within a narrative where your value is contingent on their judgment. But the moment you reject that narrative, when you walk away and stop engaging, you reclaim the power to define yourself on your own terms. And there is something profoundly liberating about realizing that their approval is not required for your existence. The narcissist would have you believe that walking away makes you powerless. The truth is, it makes you free. You are no longer bound by their manipulations, no longer caught in the exhausting cycle of proving your worth to someone who will never acknowledge it. You step outside the psychological game entirely, and in doing so, you break their hold over you. In the final analysis, walking away is the ultimate power move because it reveals the narcissist's deepest fear, that without your attention, they are nothing. And the most profound truth you can embrace is this: you do not need their permission to reclaim your freedom. You simply need the courage to walk away. One of the most unsettling truths for a narcissist is that their control over you depends entirely on your willingness to remain emotionally entangled. When you walk away, you dismantle the emotional hooks they've embedded in your psyche, and in doing so, you strip them of the power to manipulate your thoughts and feelings. This emotional detachment is not just an act of physical separation, it is a profound psychological shift that denies the narcissist the very thing they need to sustain their fragile sense of self, your emotional investment. To understand why emotional detachment is so devastating to a narcissist, you must first understand the nature of their manipulation. Narcissists do not engage with others on the basis of mutual respect or genuine connection. Instead, they view relationships as opportunities to reinforce their own self-possession. Everything they do, every compliment, every criticism, every moment of affection or cruelty is designed to elicit a specific emotional response. Your reactions serve as a mirror, reflecting back the image they desperately want to believe about themselves. Without that reflection, their carefully constructed facade begins to crumble. What makes this dynamic so damaging is that it often operates beneath the surface of your conscious awareness. Narcissists are masters of subtlety. They know how to push your buttons in ways that seem almost imperceptible. They may use guilt to keep you feeling responsible for their well-being, or they may play the victim to make you feel like walking away would be an act of cruelty. And when that fails, they can turn to more aggressive tactics, criticism, blame, or even outright emotional abuse to keep you locked in a state of confusion and self-doubt. This constant emotional turmoil is not accidental. It is a deliberate strategy designed to keep you psychologically tethered. When you are caught in this cycle, it becomes difficult to distinguish your own thoughts and feelings from the distortions the narcissist imposes on you. You begin to question yourself. Am I overreacting? Am I the problem? This erosion of self-trust is precisely what gives the narcissist their power. The more confused and uncertain you become, the easier it is for them to control you. But here's the critical point. This power only exists as long as you remain emotionally engaged. The moment you decide to detach, to stop explaining yourself, to stop defending your perspective, to stop seeking their validation, their entire strategy collapses. Emotional detachment is the ultimate rejection of their control because it communicates a simple but devastating truth. They no longer have the ability to shape your reality. This detachment does not mean you stop caring about what happened. It does not mean you pretend the pain wasn't real. What it does mean is that you refuse to allow the narcissist's actions to define your worth or dictate your emotional state. And this is where the true power lies. Because when you walk away with emotional clarity, you send a message that shakes the very foundation of their identity. I no longer need your approval. I no longer accept your version of reality. And I will no longer participate in this toxic dynamic. What makes this so devastating to the narcissist is that they cannot control what they cannot access. If you refuse to engage in arguments, if you stop responding to their provocations, if you no longer react with pain or anger, you deprive them of the emotional fuel they rely on to maintain their sense of superiority. And without that fuel, they are left to confront the very thing they spend their lives avoiding, the emptiness within themselves. Now, you might wonder, why is this so unbearable for them? The answer lies in the psychological core of narcissism itself. At the root of their behavior is a profound insecurity, a sense of unworthiness that they cannot face directly. Their entire personality is constructed as a defense mechanism against that core vulnerability. By provoking strong emotional reactions from others, they temporarily escape that inner void. But when you detach, when you refuse to play their game, you force them back into contact with that painful reality. This is why so many narcissists react with fury or desperation when you try to leave. It is not because they love you, nor is it because they genuinely care about the relationship. It is because your absence confronts them with a truth they cannot bear, that their power was always an illusion, contingent entirely on your willingness to participate. Walking away, then, is not just an act of physical separation, it is a radical act of self-liberation. It requires the courage to trust your own perceptions, to reclaim your emotional autonomy, and to accept that you do not need the narcissist's permission to define your worth. And once you internalize that truth, you become untouchable. What's remarkable is that emotional detachment does not require the narcissist to change. It only requires you to change your response. And that is where your true power lies. You cannot force a narcissist to reflect, to take responsibility, or to offer genuine empathy. But you can choose to stop feeding their delusion. You can choose to walk away, not with bitterness or revenge, but with the quiet confidence of someone who has reclaimed their dignity. In the end, the greatest power you have over a narcissist is the power to leave them behind, psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually. When you walk away and refuse to engage, you deliver a blow they cannot recover from, because the one thing they fear most is the one thing you have the power to give, your indifference. One of the most profound consequences of walking away from a narcissist is that it forces them to confront the limits of their control. Narcissists operate under the illusion that they are the central figure in every relationship, puppet masters pulling the strings of those around them. This belief is not just arrogance, it is a psychological necessity. Their entire self-dominion is built on the idea that they possess the power to shape how others feel, think, and behave. Without that control, their carefully crafted facade begins to crack. And when you walk away, when you remove yourself as a source of validation, you deliver a blow to their ego that is as disorienting as it is unbearable. To understand why this is so devastating, you need to consider how deeply a narcissist's sense of self is intertwined with their ability to manipulate others. At their core, narcissists suffer from a profound internal emptiness, a chasm of insecurity they cannot bear to face directly. To avoid this void, they construct a false self, an idealized image that masks their feelings of inadequacy. But here's the problem. This false self is fragile. It cannot sustain itself without external reinforcement. And the primary source of that reinforcement is other people, specifically people who are willing to play the role the narcissist assigns to them. When you engage with a narcissist, whether through affection, anger, or even attempts to hold them accountable, you are feeding this illusion. Your emotional responses validate their belief that they are significant and powerful. This is why they provoke you, charm you, and push your boundaries. They need your reactions to maintain their distorted self-image. And as long as you remain within their emotional orbit, you are, in a very real sense, reinforcing their delusion. But when you walk away, that dynamic shatters. You refuse to play the role they've assigned to you. You no longer mirror back the image they want to see. And in doing so, you strip them of the external validation that props up their fragile identity. This is not just a minor inconvenience for them, it is an existential threat. Without someone to control, without a constant source of emotional feedback, the narcissist is left alone with the very thing they've spent their entire lives running from, themselves. And that, more than anything, is what terrifies them. The act of walking away is so powerful precisely because it is a rejection of the narcissist's core belief. The belief that they are indispensable and in control. It tells them in no uncertain terms that their power was always an illusion, and this realization is intolerable. Narcissists thrive on the idea that you need them more than they need you. When you leave, you flip that script. You demonstrate through your actions, not your words, that they are not as vital as they want to believe. This is why so many narcissists react with rage or desperation when someone tries to leave. It is not love, it is not remorse, it is panic, a desperate attempt to restore the equilibrium that your departure has shattered. They will use every tool at their disposal, guilt, shame, even promises of change, to pull you back into their orbit, not because they value you as a person, but because they cannot bear to lose the psychological scaffolding that you provide. And here is the uncomfortable truth. The more power they believe they had over you, the more devastating your departure will be. Narcissists are drawn to people who are empathetic, people who are willing to give, to forgive, to explain, And these are the very qualities that make you susceptible to their manipulation. But when you finally reach the point where you refuse to engage, when you decide that your peace is worth more than their approval, you deliver a blow that no amount of manipulation can undo. Walking away also has a profound impact on you. It reclaims your agency. Narcissists thrive on making you doubt yourself, your perceptions, your feelings, even your reality. Over time, this erodes your sense of autonomy, but the moment you choose to leave, you reclaim the authority to define your own worth. You no longer need their validation to feel whole. And in that act of self-assertion, you begin the process of healing the very wounds they exploited. This does not mean that walking away is easy. It often requires confronting your deepest fears. Fear of being misunderstood, fear of losing someone you once cared about, fear of the unknown, But what you must understand is this: every moment you remain entangled with a narcissist is a moment you surrender your freedom. And no one, no matter how charming or persuasive, has the right to hold your freedom hostage. When you walk away and refuse to engage, you are not only breaking free from their manipulation, you are forcing them to face a truth they cannot escape. Without your participation, their power dissolves. Without your emotional energy, their illusion crumbles. And without you in their grasp, they are left to confront the emptiness they have spent a lifetime avoiding. In the end, the most powerful statement you can make to a narcissist is not an argument, it is not an explanation, it is your absence. It is the quiet, unwavering decision to remove yourself from the game entirely. Because when you walk away and never look back, you deliver a message that cuts deeper than any words ever could. You no longer have power over me. Another reason walking away is the narcissist's worst nightmare lies in a truth that is as simple as it is profound. Without your attention, they lose their ability to control the narrative. Narcissists are not merely obsessed with controlling people, they are obsessed with controlling how those people perceive reality. For them, power is not just about making you act a certain way, it is about shaping how you interpret the world, how you see yourself, and how you define the relationship. This manipulation of perception is not accidental, it is deliberate, and it is one of their most potent tools. Narcissists operate in the shadows of ambiguity. They twist facts, distort memories, and blur the lines between truth and falsehood. This psychological manipulation, commonly known as gaslighting, serves a single purpose: to make you question your own judgment while elevating theirs. When you are trapped in a relationship with a narcissist, you often find yourself second-guessing things that once seemed obvious. Over time, this confusion weakens your ability to trust yourself. And once that trust is broken, the narcissist's control becomes far more difficult to escape. But here's where walking away becomes a radical act of defiance. The moment you remove yourself from their influence, you begin to reclaim your reality. You stop allowing their version of the story to dominate your thoughts. This is crucial because a narcissist's power depends on your participation, your willingness to accept their version of events. When you walk away, you cut off their ability to feed you the narrative they want you to believe. Consider how deeply unsettling this must be for them. Narcissists are masters of impression management. They carefully curate how they are perceived by others, often projecting an image of confidence, charm, and superiority. But this image is only effective if it is believed. When you refuse to engage, you threaten the very foundation of this facade. Without your compliance, they lose the ability to shape the story. And without that power, they are forced to confront a terrifying possibility: that their version of reality is not the only one, and perhaps not even the true one. Walking away does more than remove you from the narcissist's immediate grasp. It also creates space for the truth to emerge. When you are caught in their web of manipulation, it can feel impossible to see things clearly. Your emotions are constantly being manipulated, pushed and pulled in ways that keep you off balance. But distance brings clarity. The longer you remain separate from their influence, the more clearly you begin to see the dynamics at play. And once you see the truth for what it is, their power begins to lose its hold over you. Narcissists know this. That is why they fight so desperately to keep you entangled. The more you distance yourself, the more you start to piece together the reality they tried to hide. And it is not just the truth about them, it is the truth about yourself. You begin to remember who you were before their manipulation took hold. You reconnect with your values, your perceptions, your sense of inner dignity, and once you reclaim that internal authority, it becomes nearly impossible for them to regain control. This is why the mere act of walking away is so threatening to a narcissist. It signals that you are no longer willing to let them define your reality. And when you reclaim that power, you expose the fundamental lie at the heart of their manipulation, that they were ever in control to begin with. They never truly held power over you, not in any real, lasting sense. What they held was your attention, your emotional investment. But the moment you decide to withdraw those things, their influence crumbles. It is important to understand that narcissists cannot survive without an audience. Their identity is performative. It depends on the constant affirmation of others. When you walk away, you do more than deny them a source of validation. You deny them the ability to maintain their illusion of control. And for someone whose entire self-worth is built on that illusion, this is nothing short of a catastrophe. And perhaps most importantly, walking away forces a narcissist to confront themselves. As long as they can manipulate others, they can avoid facing their own internal emptiness. But when their manipulations fail, when the people they once controlled refuse to engage, they are left alone with the very thing they fear the most, their own inadequacy. Without an external target for their blame and projection, the cracks in their false self begin to show. And that is a reality they will do almost anything to avoid. Your absence speaks a truth that no argument ever could. They are not as powerful as they believe. And more than that, you are not as weak as they hoped. Walking away restores your sense of reality, your clarity of thought, and your freedom to define your own life. And for a narcissist, there is no greater nightmare than realizing that their control was never as absolute as they imagined. In the end, the most profound act of power is not confrontation, it is disengagement. By walking away, you send a message that is impossible for the narcissist to ignore. Their ability to control you has ended, and in reclaiming your freedom, you deliver a blow to their ego from which they may never fully recover. One of the most devastating consequences of walking away from a narcissist is that it strips them of the emotional supply they so desperately crave. Narcissists, at their core, are emotional parasites. They require constant validation, attention, and emotional reactions to maintain their fragile sense of self. This is not a casual desire. It is a profound, insatiable need. Without a steady stream of emotional energy from those around them, the narcissist's carefully constructed facade begins to crack, and they are left to face the emptiness within. Understanding this dynamic requires a deeper look at what psychologists often refer to as narcissistic supply. This term describes the emotional sustenance narcissists draw from others, whether it is admiration, fear, anger, or even sadness. Any emotional reaction will do because for the narcissist, it confirms their power and influence. When you engage with them, whether through arguments, justifications, or even attempts to hold them accountable, you are in essence feeding this supply. You are acknowledging their centrality in your emotional world. And this is precisely what they need to maintain their inflated yet deeply fragile self-image. But here is the crucial point. When you walk away, you cut off that supply. You refuse to play the role they have assigned to you in their psychological drama. And without that emotional energy, the narcissist is left in a void, a space where their illusions of control and superiority can no longer be sustained. It is in this vacuum that the true consequences of your absence begin to unfold. For the narcissist, this withdrawal is not merely an inconvenience, it is an existential threat. Their entire identity hinges on the reflections they receive from others. Without these reflections, without someone to mirror their importance or to react to their provocations, they are left to confront a reality they cannot bear, their own profound insecurity and inadequacy. This is why they will go to such lengths to keep you entangled. They cannot afford to lose the emotional energy you provide. It is not just about power, it is about survival. The psychological impact of losing their supply is profound. Narcissists, despite their outward arrogance, are deeply insecure individuals. Their grandiosity is a mask. a defense mechanism constructed to shield themselves from feelings of worthlessness and self-doubt. When you walk away, you force them to face those very feelings. Deprived of the external validation they rely on, they are left vulnerable to their own self-loathing, and because they lack the internal resources to cope with this, the result is often a spiral of emotional turmoil, ranging from rage to despair. This is why narcissists often react so aggressively when they sense they are losing control. They may attempt to draw you back in through manipulation, employing tactics like guilt tripping, love bombing, or even outright intimidation. They may smear your reputation to others in a desperate attempt to regain a sense of power. Anything to provoke a reaction. But if you remain steadfast, if you refuse to re-engage, you deny them the one thing they cannot live without: your emotional energy. It is important to recognize that by withholding your attention, you are not simply protecting yourself, you are dismantling their ability to maintain their false self. The narcissist's sense of superiority is only as strong as the people who reinforce it. Without that external reinforcement, the mask begins to slip. And once it does, they are left to face a truth they have spent their entire lives avoiding. They are not as powerful, not as special, and not as invincible as they believe themselves to be. This is the core of why walking away is so devastating to a narcissist. It exposes the lie at the heart of their identity, and perhaps even more importantly, it reclaims your power. By refusing to participate in their manipulative games, you assert your autonomy. You affirm that your emotional well-being is not theirs to control. This is not merely an act of defiance, it is an act of profound self-respect. It says, I will no longer sacrifice my peace to sustain your illusion. And make no mistake, this is the narcissist's worst nightmare. They cannot bear to lose control. They cannot tolerate the idea that someone they once manipulated can now exist beyond their reach. But your decision to walk away shatters this illusion. It forces them to confront a reality where their power is not absolute and their influence has limits. And nothing terrifies a narcissist more than the realization that their ability to control others is ultimately an illusion. The beauty of walking away is that it does not require confrontation or explanation. It does not rely on their acknowledgement or understanding. It is a silent but devastating withdrawal of the very thing they cannot live without. And in doing so, you not only break free from their grip, you force them to confront the void they have spent their lives running from. In the end, the most profound power you possess is the power to choose where you direct your energy. And when you choose to walk away, you deliver a blow from which a narcissist may never fully recover. Because once you stop feeding their illusions, they are left with nothing but themselves. And for a narcissist, that is the most unbearable reality of all.